Hello? It's okay, we can talk, right? We can talk. Thank y'all so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this for several weeks. I will tell you though, this is not a fun topic, right? This is not a feel-good series of lessons, but I hope that what we come away with is some information, that it's an informative series of lessons, that it's a much needed and serious topic, and I've known too many. I've known too many over my whole lifespan, but even in the last 8 years that I've been working with the church at Fultondale, I've known too many that have succumbed to addiction. And it's one of those things that it doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter your life circumstance. If it can find you, it will find you. And our kids especially are in a very susceptible culture right now. We are inundated with it. It's glamorized. It's celebrated, and it's scary. And so what I thought I would do tonight to get us ready for some real talk, because that's what this is going to be, real talk, and I hope that y'all are going to be comfortable with that. I think that's why I was asked to come and talk about it, because I'm a real guy, and so I don't pull a lot of punches. But what I wanted to do was maybe qualify that a little bit tonight and tell you a little bit about me. I know a lot of you in here. I've got some family over here on this side of the room if they'll claim me. But I don't know everybody. And so what I wanted to do was help introduce myself, to tell you a little bit about me and why I might be qualified to talk on this subject. I talk on this subject quite a bit because of my experience. As you can tell from the slide behind me, I am a statistic. And that's really what I kind of wanted to introduce to you tonight, is the fact that when you look up statistics about teens and addiction, I'm one of those. I grew up that way, and we're going to talk about my conversion to Christ, because it's not coincidental whatsoever that evangelism goes hand in hand with what we're trying to do with our kids. We are trying to share with them the good news. That is ultimately what we're trying to do. And when someone is in the throes of addiction, good news is what they need. And so I'm going to kind of combine those topics tonight in the introduction to this series, and to tell you a little bit about myself and where I come from. I got several quotes that I'm going to use tonight. I'm passionate about this topic. I'm passionate about evangelism, and I am passionate about our kids. Many of you know I'm heavily involved with the Florida College camp, and that's actually how I even got here. I was asked to go and serve as a counselor at Alabama camp back in 2010, and I didn't know anybody from Alabama. We just got invited to go. Someone thought that I would be a good fit, and I went, and ended up becoming a preacher out of that. I was not a preacher prior to that, but got invited to be one, and it's absolutely been the best move of my life, moving from Atlanta to here. And so I think often about this quote. It's the quote that says, "Be who you needed when you were young." And that is one of those things that fuels me, because when I was young, I definitely needed somebody. And so that's going to be an overarching theme as we go through these lessons this week. Be who you needed when you were young, because ultimately our young need somebody. And so without any more delay, I want to get right into it. This is one of my favorite quotes. Eyes that look are common. Eyes that see are rare. And that's pretty self-explanatory. It's very easy to look at people. It's very easy to make judgments about people based on what we see when we look. But to truly see somebody, we got to look a little deeper. We've got to get past certain stereotypes. We've got to get past superficial, on the surface things. To truly see what's going on with somebody, you got to get close. You've got to get close. It's not enough to, from a distance, just view someone. And in regards to addiction in our teens, we have to see. We can't just look. We can't just point. It's very easy to identify They got a problem. Okay. My grandpa told me when I was young, never tell a man that he's sunburned. He knows. What you want to do is offer that man some aloe, right? What's more helpful? Telling him what he already knows or offering some help? And so this quote really kind of sets the theme of all these lessons: to see, to truly see and get involved. And tonight I want to talk about that a little bit. This quote has been really important to me over the years. And so I'll get right into the backstory here. I am a statistic, as the title slide said. I've got a couple here that I pulled from Barna, and a very reliable source. And I wanted to share these with you to kind of set the stage for tonight. Number one, half of all American children will witness the breakup of a parent's marriage. Half. 40% of children growing up in America today are raised without their fathers. Almost half. Studies in the early 1980s show that children in repeat divorces earned lower grades. Number four, teenagers in single-parent families and in blended families are 3 times more likely to need psychological help within a given year. Number five, compared to children from homes disrupted by death, now really pay attention to this one. Compared to children from homes disrupted by death, children from divorced homes have more psychological problems. The death of a parent is less devastating to a child than divorce. Now just marinate on that for a second. Most victims of child molestation come from single-parent households or are children of drug ring members. Number seven, a child in a female-headed home is 10 times more likely to be beaten or murdered. 70% of long-term prison inmates grew up in broken homes. Number nine, children of divorce, particularly boys, tend to be more aggressive toward others than those children of parents who did not divorce. And number 10, children of divorced parents are roughly 2 times more likely to drop out of high school than their peers who benefit from living with parents who did not divorce. Now, I didn't give you these statistics to pick on divorced people. I'm not doing that. What I'm giving you is my background. Every single one of these was true for me, with the exception of graduating from high school. My grandmother was very influential on me, and I at least saw that through. But I never set foot in a college. Even with a scholarship offer to go to the University of Georgia, I turned it down. I was going to be a rock star. I didn't need college. And it almost happened, but I turned it down. I didn't really have any good guidance during that time in my life. But the statistic that rings true and the most alarming is this: 72% of male children from divorced homes where abuse, that's physical or mental, is present, fall into atheism and fall into drug addiction. 72%. That number's a little bit lower for females, but not by much. Females reported about 53% fall into atheism and addiction. The point's this: Satan doesn't wait. We love to talk about the age of accountability in the church, whatever that means. That we've got this age in mind where people should be baptized without taking into account maturity, commitment level, comprehension, all those things. The point is, Satan doesn't wait for the age of accountability. I was sexually assaulted from 5 years old to 8 years old by an older family member. Satan didn't wait for me to grow up. Satan doesn't wait for our kids. And just like the passage on the screen, where Jesus comes to Peter, he says, Simon, look, Satan's asking for you. Satan's asking for you that he might sift you like wheat. Satan wants to sift all of us, but he definitely wants to sift our kids. If he can shake them up just enough, it doesn't have to be anything dramatic or tragic. Just shake them up enough, he gets in. And things like self-medicating and numbing and avoidance and escape become very attractive, especially to the young mind. And he uses things like entertainment. And he uses things like social media. And he uses friends that they make at school that might come from situations. And that's what I'm going to talk about some tomorrow night. All those statistics I read to you, most of our kids, that's not the issue. That's not the case for them. And yet, how does it happen? How do we have so many kids in the church that fall into addiction? It's because Satan doesn't wait. He starts young. He starts now. And what we sometimes fail to see is that the people we encounter every day, and that would include our families, have been sifted. 9 times out of 10, our kids aren't going to tell us what's going on. My son will be 15 in November. And we are ecstatic if we can get a whole sentence out of him. Kids aren't going to tell you they've been sifted. Hey, man, you have a good day? Yep. Okay. Good talk. Most of the people we see every day have been sifted. Again, eyes that look are common. Eyes that see are rare. And so, after all, who wants to share the gospel with this guy? 16 years old there. Absolutely believed that I was cooler than everybody else. Do you think this guy would listen? See, 9 times out of 10, we would say, no, that guy doesn't want to hear this. That guy's not going to change. That guy doesn't care about godly things. This guy failed the 9th grade for fighting. You get suspended 45 days, 9 times. You don't pass. This guy was drinking every weekend. This guy was smoking pot. This guy was very sexually promiscuous. From 14 to 17, he's already experimenting with cocaine and methamphetamines and well on his way to being addicted to those substances. I was the life of the party, though. It was a good time. By 17, I was the front man in the touring rock band. And by senior year, I was very well on my way to atheism and addiction both. All those statistics were catching up to the young adult version of myself. And I was just smart enough to think that I had all the answers. I was just smart enough to think that I was smarter than everybody. And so judging by my looks and my behaviors, who in their right mind would think for a second, well, this guy needs some help? I was kind of a lost cause. Just judging me by my looks and not really seeing what was going on there. No one thought for a second they could sit and share the message of Christ, knowing that I very well might dismiss and reject it altogether. Why waste your time? Well, look harder. Look deeper. Get past the hair. Get past the leather jacket. Those are dead eyes. I was high in this picture. I kind of remember when it was taken, but I know that I was high. I was high in this picture, and I was looking for something I was looking for something. There is behind the look and behind the egregious behavior a young man who was hurt and desperately seeking peace, answers. I really wanted to believe. I really want to believe. But you know what the saddest part about that is? The saddest part of that is not what I just told you. The saddest part is I went to high school with Christians. Obviously, many different flavors of denominational people, but there were members of the Lord's church where I went to high school. About 10 years ago at camp, had a mother bring her son in to meet his crazy counselor with a mohawk, and to both of our surprise, we went to high school together. And she said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm your son's counselor." "What are you doing here?" She said, "Well, I grew up in the church." Wow, small world. I didn't know you were a Christian. You were so crazy in high school. And I didn't mean this the way that it sounds, but I said, "I didn't know you were either." She came to all my parties. She didn't look the way that I did, but she was participating in the same things that I was. And so, friends, our kids don't have to look like this to be involved in these things. I didn't say that to be rude or to place some sort of false guilt on her or responsibility. But she had evidently grown up in the church with people that would soon actually become family. She actually had attended with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law who worship at the Mountain View Church of Christ in Cumming, Georgia. And I say that to make the point that when I often get asked why I became a Christian so late, and how did I become an addict and someone not get involved with me sooner, it's to say that I never got a chance to hear the gospel because I never got invited to church. I mean, who's going to invite this guy to church? This guy's not going to comply with the dress code. I still don't. But the point was, I didn't know she was a Christian either because she would come to my parties and we would drink and we would do all those things. And so I never knew that she actually struggled early in her 20s with getting sober also. Two entirely different backgrounds, two entirely different family situations. She was not a statistic. She grew up in a great home, great parents, faithful in their attendance to worship, very conservative in her appearance and the way that she carried herself, but she struggled just like I did. How does that happen? Satan doesn't wait. Satan doesn't care he doesn't care where you go to church. He doesn't care who your mom and dad are. He hates us. And he wants us with him. But you know what? Believe it or not, I would have gone to church. If someone would have just asked me, I would have gone. I mean, just for the social aspect of it was enough for me. I would have gone just to go and hang out and talk with people. But it would be another 10 years before I ever really got to sit down with anybody and they would see past this guy. And so I graduated high school and my band hit the road, which was absolutely the worst possible thing in the world for me because I was 18 years old in a very adult environment. And when I say adult, I don't mean mature. I just mean that you had to be an adult to be in the places that I was in. I wasn't even drinking age, and I'm entertainment in those places. You know, they never ask you, is everybody in the band legal? They just assume that you are. And for 10 years, 25 days a month on the road, man, living that life. And eventually, you begin to decompose. You begin to break down. You can only keep that up for so long before you start to come apart, which is exactly where Satan wanted me. But what he didn't count on was a beautiful young woman that would see past the me that was shown and saw straight to the me that I was hiding through my addictions. My wife was my first introduction to anything related to the Church of Christ. You might say my wife was my first evangelist that I encountered. And the reason I use that term is because an evangelist shares the good news. An evangelist shares the gospel. But an evangelist also shares hope. And an evangelist also shares the salvation of God. That you can set these things down. And by the time I met her, I was already becoming very tired. Again, that lifestyle breaks you down when you're up for 3 or 4 days at a time because you're doing cocaine at length. Whatever facade you're holding up begins to fall down. And so, all my Christian friends in high school that I knew, that would be at my band shows and be at my parties, but then judge me on Monday morning for doing the same things they were doing on Friday, contributed to my lack of faith in what I understood God to be then. I had friends who were hypocrites. I had a dad who was a total failure as a role model for me. And if my friends were what Christianity had to offer and what getting sober meant, well, then I didn't want it. Because I was already doing that without the guilt. And if my earthly father that I could see couldn't love me, how in the world is a heavenly father that I can't see supposed to love me? And so as you begin to press these things down, the drugs become necessary. It's not fun anymore. It's not fun anymore. It's just about getting through the day. But this woman gave me a glimpse of the possibility of it all. She was kind. I didn't know very many kind women in that scene that I was in. She was good. She had a morality about her that I had never experienced. She pushed me to be better. She motivated me. And she told me that she came from a religious family, and I didn't bat an eyelash because I'm like, oh yeah, listen, I know all about you religious people. And so she brings me to meet her family, and none of them were impressed. But they weren't mean to me. I mean, her mom was. So we date, we get serious, we get engaged, and all the while I'm still in my band, I'm still using drugs, and I'm just keeping it hidden from her. So even though I'd won her family over by this point, my wife is no dummy. She began to notice, and though I hadn't confessed to her a lack of faith, I certainly didn't live like I had one. And so we stayed the course, and it just got rockier, and it got rockier, but we got married anyway. 2 years later, we found ourselves expecting a baby girl. This was a game changer. Because for the first time, I was going to be responsible for someone other than myself. Because even though Kelly and I were married, I didn't understand what that word meant. No idea what that meant, to be married, to be committed. And so when my daughter's born, everything changes. Because now there's a possibility that God's real, because I couldn't see it before, but now all of a sudden I've got this little beautiful bundle. And it dawns on me that I'm on the hook until I can find some young man to take her away from me. Thank you. Wasn't hard to do though, because at his age, he's a much better man than I was at my age, at that age. And Kelly has shown me the possibility of a person living by some sense of godly principle, but Kaya being born showed me the possibility of a powerful God. And when I held her for the first time, something woke up in me, and I didn't feel like I needed the drugs. I was high already, holding her. And then I got scared because I was like, what if you mess her up? What if you make her like you? And I can remember I had been on a road trip, and we had played in Columbus, Georgia, the last night of that road trip, and I was like, you know what, I'm an hour and a half away from Atlanta, I can make it. Now, I haven't slept in 3 days, so I get the last bit of cocaine that I've got and do it. And I head for Atlanta as fast as I can. And I walk in about 5 in the morning, and I poke my head in her bedroom, and there she is. She's standing up in her crib. Hair, like 2-year-olds do. Daddy. And I couldn't. I just backed out of the room. And then she starts to cry because she sees me. She hadn't seen me in a week, Daddy, right? I was terrified that I was going to get some of what I got on her, or that I was going to stumble and drop her, that I was going to mess her up like I was. And so I just walked down the hall, just doing everything I can not to burst into tears and wake my wife up. And I realized then, you have got to straighten up, you loser. What is wrong with you? She's in there crying for you. And I was so selfish and so self-consumed. I couldn't. And so 2 months pass. And my wife catches up with all that I had going on. The drugs, other women, lies, manipulations. I mean, I had a mound of stuff that I was sitting on. And so she takes that 2-year-old and she leaves. And of course, I'm like, yeah, fine, whatever, get out of here. I'm better off. What do? I call the dope man. And I get some drugs, and I get to the house, and I get them all chopped out, laid out, ready to do, and here comes my annoying brother-in-law knocking on the door. What do you want, Mark? He said, I want to know what you're doing. I don't know. That's a loaded question, my friend. I have no idea what I'm doing. He said, you're making a mess. He was the first person to not tiptoe around my addiction, to see me, not just look at me, he saw me, he looked right through me and said, you're about to lose everything. Now tell me what's wrong with you. And so, for the next 3 hours, I told him every ugly truth. I told him about all the drugs. I told him about the other women. I told him about all of it. He says, yeah, you've made a mess. And he's looking at me. And now, no doubt, I've got more experience on the battlefield than Mark ever had. But there was one thing that Mark had that I didn't, and that was determination. And he looked at me. He looked right through me. And I could see it, man. He wanted to take me out in the yard and beat me for all that I was worth, which was not much at that moment. He says, you lived your way 28 years. You've made a complete mess. Aren't you tired? Aren't you ready to do something else? I said, Mark, you know I don't believe in God. He said, yeah, man, but he believes in you. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, you don't have anything else to lose except your life. He goes, you want somebody else to raise your daughter? Because that's what's going to happen. This addiction of yours is going to cause that to happen. He goes, now either you can step up and be a father and be a husband, or you can just get used to the fact that somebody else is going to be daddy and you're not anymore. So he had my attention. Come to church tomorrow night. I'll see if I can get Kelly to meet you there. And so we met at the Mountain View Church of Christ, Cumming, Georgia. Walked in, I was really apprehensive. You think my hair is funny now. It was jet black, and I had a nose ring, eyebrows pierced, got tattoos. Much, much skinnier. Not a good diet, though, I don't recommend. And I was really apprehensive about walking into that building and those people seeing an addict, not really looking through me and seeing me, but just looking at me with those eyes that are common. And you know what happened? They saw me. And they didn't care. They didn't care what I looked like. They didn't care where I had come from. They didn't care why I was there. All they cared about was that I was there. It didn't matter even why I was there. We're just glad that you're here. And those people loved me. From that night on, I can't tell you what the lesson was. I can't tell you, well, I can tell you what the Bible class was. They were in Revelation 19, which immediately I thought, man, what have I gotten into in this place? I don't remember the songs they sang, but I remember how many people loved me that night. And there was a big man that met me out in the foyer. And I saw him. As I'm walking out, I'm like, this guy's going to want to talk to me. His name was Brownlee Reeves. Brownie, what he made me call him. He says, Keith, I'm Brownie Reeves. I'm the evangelist here. You ever study your Bible? No, sir, I don't have one. I'll bring you one. How about tomorrow night? And he did not let me out of the foyer without a Bible study. And so Brownlee becomes a regular staple at our house, meeting with us. He's letting me ask him all of my atheistic gotcha questions that I thought I had. And over time, he gains my trust, and I begin to tell him what's going on with me and Kelly, and that I'm an addict, and that our marriage is just about over, and we are trying to save it. And so he stops then answering all of my questions and starts giving me answers from the Scripture. And he shows me that there is freedom from addiction. And he shows me that there is a better way. And so we study. We study. And after a couple of weeks, after every time I would come up with a question, and he would take his Bible and he would turn it around and he would push it across the table and make me read it. I said, you know what, I think there's something to this. And it began to make a little more sense finally after a month that Kelly and I needed to be baptized. And so we were. There was a quote that I had seen at work that day that said, the day came when the desire to stay the same was more painful than the desire to change. Comfort, peace, a clear conscience. This was all finally coming into view. And the point is that it took 5 groups of people, 5 people and 1 group of people, to see through me. The evangelists in my life were my wife, as the first introduction, and then my daughter, to show me that God was absolutely real. But then it was Mark Bowman, having the hard conversation with me, saying the things that needed to be said, not sparing my feelings, because he realized that I was in a crisis. And you can't coddle people in a crisis. You have to speak plain. Speak with love, absolutely. But never with sugar. And then the Mountain View Church of Christ. And finally, Brownlee Reeves. It took 5 people to reach me in my addiction and share the gospel with me. And the reason I'm saying that, the whole setup here, is that these lessons this weekend is about helping to equip everyone here to be an evangelist for somebody. And that our teens and their friends all need you to be somebody like I needed somebody when I was young. And so what I hope to do this weekend, what I hope to do is this, after qualifying tonight, my experience and my background on this subject, I hope to equip you so that we can avoid tragedy. Tomorrow night, I'm gonna talk about a tragedy that still affects me. From a kid that didn't look like me. From a kid that had grown up in the church. And friends, we have to see. It's not enough to just look. We have to see. And we all have to get involved. This is not just Greg's job. This is not the elder's job. This is everyone's job. These are our kids, and Satan can't have them. And so what I hope to do is at least leave you some things to think about, but more importantly, some things to put into action. To truly see our kids, to look past what we see up front and to look deeper. Are there any questions tonight before I have them ring the bell? I know we're getting close to time here. I think we're actually past time. If there's anything that I can do, this weekend, I hope to engage in some conversation that you might get to ask questions that you've always wanted to ask, but you didn't know an addict. And I will tell you this, I've been a Christian 20 years this year, but I've only been sober for 15. It took me 5 years to be completely incident-free. And I still think about it every day. And so understand, this thing ain't going away. Yes, sir.
As you were coming out of your addiction, I mean, did it process, you said it took a long time, was that a combination of mental health, encouragement, what all was involved in that?
So after being a Christian for about 2 months, I relapsed. Which, you'll hear it all the time. Relapse is recovery, right? And so I did. And so I did exactly what all the books say you should do. Go find a meeting, find you a sponsor, and do that whole thing. Now, I'm not saying that AA and NA, which is, I went to Narcotics Anonymous. I'm not saying they're not good organizations, and they do help a lot of people. But it wasn't for me. The man that I talked to about being my sponsor asked me how bad I wanted to get sober. I said, well, I'm here, right? I mean, obviously, I want to get sober. He said, what if I told you you had to leave your wife? I said, well, then you're an idiot. And I left. Because that's why I'm here. I don't want to lose my wife. And what I realized was that the church became my support group. About another 7 months after that, I relapsed again. And I relapsed in a big way. And so I went forward. Now, not growing up in the church, I didn't know, I was terrified. And to be honest, I think most people are terrified of that. I get the invitation at least 52 times a year. Rare, man, does anybody ever come forward, because I think we associate shame and all this stuff. But if you just took advantage of the help that's available. James 5:16 says, the prayer of a righteous man avails much. Well, how much more then if 100 pray for us? And so I went forward. And what I realized that day is that I was not an island. I used to sit in my seat and I'd look around the room at all these people who had it together, right? Looking at all these people, I'm like, oh, well, that guy's, man, if I could just be like him. And oh, look at this guy. And, and then my brother-in-law Mark was the unattainable standard. I go forward, and those same people that I had put up on pedestals came and said, you know what, dude, cocaine's not my thing, but I'd have a drink right now if I could. I had another guy come up and say, you know what, it's not my thing, but I battled with pornography like you wouldn't believe. And all of a sudden, these people that I had placed on this pedestal, this status that was unreachable, became real. And I realized then that's what church is. And church became my support group. And it took 5 years. I would go sometimes months, 8, 9 months, and no incident, and then I would fall off. And I learned what long suffering means. I wasn't in rebellion. I was struggling. I think sometimes we fail to see the difference in that. And those people helped me. They loved me through the absolute worst time of my life. Any other questions? I hope to have some this week. I hope that you'll go home tonight and you'll think of something. I would love to engage and talk more about this experience, that if anything, it'll give you something that you can use. When Kelly and I decided, after being invited to come and work with the Fulton Dale Church in 2012, we said, you know what, we're not going to keep any of this a secret. We'll be willing to share all the embarrassing details, because it's hard to stand in front of you. I don't know if it's hard to stand in front of y'all and tell y'all these things. These are dark times in my life, but I realize the value that's in them, that if there's something, if there's some insight that can be given, or there's some perspective that will help just save one, then I'll be embarrassed every day of my life if that's what it takes. Any questions? Thank y'all so much for letting me do this. I'm looking forward to tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, the lesson will be called Not My Kid. We're going to talk about denial that we sometimes have. We look at our kids and we think, oh, that will never happen to my kid. And it happens all the time. And so tomorrow night, we're going to learn how to equip ourselves to combat denial. That is also one of Satan's favorite tools when it comes to us and keeping us blinded to what might be going on and keeping us from truly seeing our kids. Thank y'all so much.